Hungary has stunned Europe with a decision that few saw coming, sending shockwaves through political circles and everyday citizens alike. The government has announced a dramatic and unprecedented shift in its foreign policy, capturing the attention of the world's media and sparking intense debate at home and abroad. The country, long considered a core part of the European Union, is now pivoting toward China and the BRICS nations, signaling a major realignment in its international relationships. This move, officially confirmed in early 2025, marks a clear break from its traditional Western allies and opens a new, eastward-looking chapter in Hungary's history. Years of mounting frustration with the EU, over policies, values, and what many Hungarians see as a lack of respect for national interests, have pushed the country to seek new partners and opportunities. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's government argues that these new alliances will offer Hungary greater respect for its sovereignty and more freedom to chart its own course in a rapidly changing world. By joining BRICS, Hungary is stepping onto a global stage increasingly dominated by rising powers like China and Russia, and seeking a voice in shaping the future of international politics. This is a bold gamble for a relatively small nation, aiming to become a bridge between East and West, and to leverage its unique position for economic and diplomatic gain. The world is watching closely, as Hungary's move reflects a broader shift toward a multipolar global order, where influence is shared among many centers of power. New centers of power are emerging and traditional alliances are being reevaluated, as countries everywhere reconsider their place in a changing world. Hungary is the first EU member to make such a dramatic pivot, but with growing tensions across the continent, it may not be the last to seek alternatives. Its journey will be closely watched as a test case for other nations considering alternatives to Western partnerships, and for the future of the European project itself. The stakes for Hungary, and for Europe, could not be higher, as the continent stands at a crossroads, facing choices that will shape its destiny for years to come. To understand Hungary's pivot on the world stage, let's break down what BRICS is and why it matters today. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, originally a group of major emerging economies that came together in the late 2000s. These countries joined forces to amplify their voices in global decision-making and to create a counterweight to the influence of Western powers. Over time, BRICS has grown into a powerful bloc, now including Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE. This expansion reflects the group's growing appeal and its ambition to represent a broader range of developing nations. Together, these nations represent a massive share of the world's population and economy, over 40% of people on Earth, and a significant portion of global GDP. Their combined resources, markets, and influence make BRICS a major player in international affairs. BRICS was formed to counterbalance Western dominance in global affairs, especially in institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, where Western countries have traditionally held the most sway. The group created the new Development Bank, offering funding for infrastructure and development, an alternative to the World Bank and IMF. This bank helps member countries finance big projects without relying on Western loans or conditions. BRICS also aims to reduce dependence on the US dollar and Western financial systems, giving members more control over their economic futures. They're exploring new ways to trade and invest using their own currencies. For Hungary, joining BRICS means access to new markets, investment opportunities, and a club that values national sovereignty and independent decision-making. It's a strategic move to diversify economic ties beyond Europe, opening doors to fast-growing economies in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Politically, BRICS offers Hungary a platform where its voice is heard, without the political strings or conditions often attached by the EU or other Western alliances. The bloc's philosophy of non-interference in domestic affairs is especially appealing to Hungary's current leadership, who seek more autonomy in shaping their policies. In short, BRICS is a rising force in global politics and economics, and Hungary wants in on the action, hoping to benefit from this new alliance. This move could reshape Hungary's economic and political landscape for years to come, signaling a new chapter in its international relations. Hungary's relationship with the EU has been rocky for years. Disputes over migration, democratic values, and economic policy have driven a wedge between Budapest and Brussels. Hungary fiercely opposed EU migration quotas, insisting on its right to control its borders. The EU has criticized Hungary for undermining democratic checks and balances, withholding billions in funding as leverage. Hungary sees these actions as attacks on its sovereignty. The war in Ukraine deepened the divide. Hungary resisted sanctions on Russia, citing its energy needs. This stance has isolated Hungary within the EU and NATO. Prime Minister Orbán champions an illiberal democracy, prioritizing national tradition over EU liberal values. Hungary now views the EU as a threat to its identity, fueling its search for new alliances. This discontent is the driving force behind Hungary's turn to the east. As Hungary's ties with the West have cooled in recent years, the country has increasingly embraced Russia and China, seeking new alliances and opportunities beyond its traditional partners. This shift marks a significant realignment in Hungary's foreign policy, reflecting both economic interests and political strategy. Energy is central to these new relationships. Hungary relies heavily on Russian oil and gas, securing long-term supply deals even as much of Europe moves away from Moscow. This dependence gives Russia significant leverage, but also provides Hungary with stable energy at favorable prices. Russian-backed projects, like the expansion of the PAX nuclear plant, further deepen this bond, tying Hungary's energy future to Moscow and ensuring continued cooperation for decades to come. China, meanwhile, sees Hungary as a strategic gateway to the European Union, investing heavily in infrastructure projects such as the Budapest-Belgrade Railway. These projects are part of China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, linking Asia and Europe through trade and transport. These investments are fueling Hungary's economic growth, often without the political strings or conditions that typically come with EU funding, giving the government more freedom to chart its own course. Politically, Hungary often shields China from EU criticism, earning Beijing's favor and tangible benefits, such as early access to vaccines during the pandemic and increased diplomatic support. Critics, however, warn that Hungary is allowing authoritarian powers to gain a foothold inside the EU and NATO, raising concerns about the erosion of democratic values and Western unity. The government calls its approach pragmatic, balancing relationships with both East and West to maximize economic and political opportunity, and arguing that this strategy serves Hungary's national interests. This so-called Eastern opening is seen by many as a direct challenge to EU unity, testing the limits of European solidarity and cooperation. Ultimately, Hungary is betting that forging strong ties with Russia and China will secure its future prosperity and independence, even as it risks alienating its Western allies. A key part of Hungary's new direction is the Sovereignty Protection Law, passed in late 2024. The law empowers authorities to investigate groups receiving foreign funding, aiming to block outside political influence. The government claims it's defending democracy. Critics say it's silencing dissent and consolidating power. The law's vague language could target any opposition, raising fears of eroding democratic norms. It fits the government's narrative of Hungary under siege from foreign forces. This law is the domestic counterpart to Hungary's foreign policy pivot. Both reinforce national control. Together, they signal a coordinated strategy, independence from the West, and tighter control at home. Hungary is setting its own rules, regardless of EU criticism. Hungary's pivot to BRICS and China is a high-stakes gamble. The government hopes for economic growth, new markets, and investment, especially from China. But over 75% of Hungary's trade is with the EU. Turning away risks economic disruption and loss of vital funding. Politically, Hungary could become isolated within the EU and NATO, losing trust and influence among Western allies. The shift could impact everything from press freedom to living standards. If the gamble fails, Hungarians could face inflation, unemployment, and declining rights. The focus on sovereignty may come at the cost of openness and pluralism. Hungary stands at a crossroads. Its future prosperity and freedoms hang in the balance. The choices made now will shape generations. The world is watching Hungary's next move. Hungary's pivot is a major challenge for the EU. It undermines the bloc's unity and weakens its global influence. Other discontented members may follow Hungary's example, risking a fragmented, multi-speed Europe. The move raises security concerns. Hungary's closeness to Russia and China troubles both the EU and NATO. Sensitive information and alliance cohesion are at stake. The EU faces a dilemma: act harshly and risk pushing Hungary further away, or act softly and appear weak. Brussels must balance upholding its principles with keeping the bloc together. How the EU responds will test its resilience and future. The stakes for European unity have never been higher. Hungary's pivot to China and BRICS is a landmark moment in European politics. Years of friction with the EU have led Hungary to seek new partners in the East. Stronger ties with Russia and China promise growth, but risk economic and political isolation from the West. Domestic laws like the Sovereignty Protection Law reinforce this new path. For the EU, Hungary's move threatens unity and sets a precedent for others. The world is watching as alliances shift and new power centers emerge. Hungary's journey is a bold test of sovereignty in a changing world order. Whether it leads to prosperity or peril remains to be seen.